Hi, welcome to the Elle Russ Show, where I deliver content intended to inspire, educate, and motivate. Engage with me online at elleruss.com and on social media. Enjoy the show. Today, my guest is Brad Thor. He is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 21 thrillers. Brad is known for his innovative plots, but also his extensive knowledge of intelligence special operations and terrorist communities. And he's appeared on numerous television shows all over the world to discuss terrorism, current events, politics, as well as how closely his novels of international intrigue parallel the real threats facing the world today. Visit his website at bradthor.com, follow him on social media, and don't forget to pick up a copy of his latest book, Black Ice. This episode is brought to you by Rep Provisions. Rep is an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture, and it's my #1 source for quality meat. Visit repprovisions.com, enter code L15 for 15% off. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Oh, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So I've got a lot of questions for you, but before we get into your books and your life as an author and, your characters and your process as a writer, I just want to start out with a little shout out about our mutual hometown, Chicago. And I want to throw this out there and see if it hits with you, which is, I don't know about you, but I feel very nostalgic sometimes for the pretty legendary time span we lived in that city. You know what I'm saying? What are some of your favorite Chi-Town takeaways?
I'll tell you, it was, of course, when anybody looks back, it was always a simpler time, right? Particularly when you were younger. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have my own kids. I was a kid. Chicago is a very fast town. So, I was 15 with a fake ID and hanging out at the Limelight with Duran Duran and David Bowie. And it was pretty wild. It was a lot of fun.
I think about that because I tell people sometimes in growing up, and I was like, I walked to kindergarten. Like nobody would ever allow their kids to do that. And it's not that our parents were bad parents, right? It's just that it was, again, maybe a little bit more of an innocent time. And then, having a fake ID at 16 and ordering drinks at a bar is not the usual experience for most people. So it was really interesting. And what you mentioned about fast pace, and I'm not sure how you feel about this, but while I so appreciate that sort of high energy and that moving and shaking type of vibe we grew up in, in hindsight, when I look back, a little fight or flighty, and I kind of then just moved to the mountains by the beach and I kind of just want to visit cities every now and then, but I like the quiet and I like the nature. And I think it's sort of a little bit of a response to that. Do you feel similarly?
Well, you're talking to somebody who lives, I moved from Chicago 7 years ago. I've moved twice really out of Chicago. We lived in Park City, Utah for 8 years, had our kids in hospital in Salt Lake, moved back to Chicago for 8 years, and then moved to Nashville. So I've kind of done this bounce back and forth thing where it's been big city, then kind of bucolic mountain town for Park City, and now south of Nashville and lots of green and lots of property. So I do have that where I miss just the real fast pace of Chicago in big cities in general, like Paris and London and things like that. And that's probably one of the toughest things for me with COVID is that my favorite hobby, my favorite pastime is going to international destinations, and that's just been shut down.
Yeah. After Chi-Town experience, you attended USC, the University of Southern California. Was that your first choice? And if so, why? And if not, I guess pretty damn good backup school.
You know what? My first choice was Mizzou, to go to Missouri and study journalism. And my dad drew a circle on a map and said, you can go to school anywhere outside this circle. And it was basically either coast. He really saw college as an opportunity for me and my younger brother to really kick off adulthood. And my dad was a real estate developer. He had gotten out of the south side of Chicago by joining the Marine Corps and went to college on the GI Bill. And so college was something, he was the first person in our family since the family came from Scandinavia to go to college. So that was a big thing for us. So my dad was doing a lot of building hotels, office buildings in Southern California and knew a lot of USC graduates. So even though I applied to and got into Mizzou and wanted to go to the journalism program there, my dad said, nope, it's going to be the University of Southern California. It's a great school. You'll go study business. And I went, didn't like business at all, and then just switched my major without telling my folks to creative writing.
I love that. Now, after college, you had an acclaimed national public TV show called Traveling Light. I remember watching it at the time, but, yesterday I just, for the hell of it, checked out one of the episodes, and I got to say, well, first of all, you were flawless, but also I was dying laughing at the outfits, like the jeans you were wearing. I had a pretty good laugh on that, but no one had a TV show at that time like everyone can have now. That must have just been such a score of a gig. What was that experience like through those years?
Well, I always thought that travel made me a better American. It made me appreciate how good I had it to be living in the United States. So I wanted to do a TV show for younger people. The only thing on public television at the time was Rick Steves' Travels in Europe, which skewed to a much older, retired demographic. And I wanted young people to go see the world now. Don't wait until you're retired. So that's what I was pushing. Get a backpack, get a rail pass, go to Europe. And it was a lot of work because I had to go out and find the sponsorship money. Public television doesn't give you the dough. You've got to go out and shake trees and make it happen. But it was a fun gig, particularly being single and not having a family and being able to travel all over Europe. It was a blast. It was a fun show to do. And yeah, it was 1990s. So the fashion is a little different than it is today.
That was such a blast from the past. So even though you studied creative writing in college and then, you did this show, do you recall the moment or the place, like where and when you were like, you know what, I want to write a book?
Yeah. So when I graduated from USC, I had been working leasing apartments in LA, a new development right next to CBS. And so I had saved my money. I always knew I wanted to write a book. And I decided after I graduated, a friend of mine had an extra room in an apartment in Paris and said, you can come stay here. So I went to Paris and I started writing. I had gone to school. I'd done a semester abroad my junior year. So I had a lot of friends in Paris. And so I went back after graduation, started writing, and I got a couple chapters into writing a thriller and I decided to stop. And I tell people that I had this voice in the back of my head that I think we all do that says, you know what, boy, if this doesn't work, if you fail, that's going to be really embarrassing. So maybe save yourself the pain of embarrassment and just quit. Just give up. When you and I were growing up, Elle, and you're a couple of years younger than I am, but there used to be the United Negro College Foundation used to have PSAs on TV all the time. And their tagline was, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And it's very true. Mm-hmm. And I adopted that slogan and then edited it down to a mind is a terrible thing, period. Because I think that which we're most destined to do in life, we're often most afraid of. And so I packed up my laptop, shipped it back home, traveled for a while and came up with the idea for the TV show and came back, got the TV show, got public television interested in the idea and went and found the money. It was a lot of avoidance behavior. I was burning a lot of calories to run away from what I really wanted to do most with my life, which was be an author. So I did the TV show a couple of years, was very successful. And I was on my honeymoon with my wife. And she asked me over a glass of wine, she said, what would you regret on your deathbed never having done? Mm. And before I could grab the words out of the air and shove them back in my big mouth, I said, writing a book and getting it published. And she said, okay, when we get home, then you need to start carving out 2 hours protected time every day and make that dream come true. And that's love her. Yeah, that's what put me on the path to becoming a novelist.
It's so true with some of the authors, and just writers that I mentor. It's always the what will other people think? And, I think part of this is I tell some of them, I say, don't tell people you're doing it. Just knock it out, finish it. And then you can deal with presenting it to the world or letting people know. Because, Brad, I talk about this in my book, Confident as Fuck. When you're in a creative profession, wow, you get hit with a lot of downers. I remember one time someone said, a stranger was like, what do you do? And I said, I'm a writer. And this was their response. They said, so are you like a real writer who makes money at it? Or do you like
have another job, but write at Starbucks. Now, my response was very shy-town. I go, well, that's really fucking rude. Would you ask a real estate agent if they lived at home and didn't sell houses, but had their license? Or he was like, well, it's different. I'm like, no, it's not different. So I think creative people get hit with this a lot because everyone goes, oh, it's so tough, or wow, that's competitive. And no one says that to a lawyer or a person in business. And I guess because the world understands the benchmarks associated with, you become a lawyer, you join a firm, you can see the benchmarks along the way to making partner or whatnot, but we have to make our own benchmarks in these creative professions. Does that really ring true to you? Because it feels like it's just that confidence level you get hit at it by everyone in society.
Yeah, that is very much the artistic experience. But to back up to the first thing you said, which was, people talk about writing. I tell people a lot that if you're a talker, you're a talker. If you're a writer, you're a writer. And too many people talk about writing. Mm-hmm. It's funny. One of the jokes in my house, I remember seeing Maria Shriver back when she was still married to Arnold Schwarzenegger, talking about her first children's book. And they were asking about a process and all this kind of stuff. And she said, I told Arnold forever that I wanted to write a children's book. And he got so fed up with listening to her talk about writing that he looked at her one day and just said, Maria, don't talk about it, do it. And what you've probably found as a writer, and I know I have, is that once other wannabe writers hear that you're a writer and you have some degree of success, they want to sit down with you and talk about their writing. And I used to do that out of the goodness of my heart, go out for a coffee or for a lunch early in my career. Now I won't do it because 99.9% of the people that want to talk about writing are never going to finish a project. And so I tell people, if they're like, oh, I want to know about the publishing process or whatever, I say, you know what, when you have a completed project, you call me back. And then I'll talk about, because up until that point, you know what, you can waste your own time. I don't care. But you're not going to waste mine. And as an artist, that's one of the most valuable commodities that I have is my time. So I heard, I forget if it was Joe Rogan or who it was. I was listening to a podcast and they talked about the commitments they make is like a raised planter bed. And you've got this big garden with 3 raised planter beds. And every time you say yes to somebody, that's another thing growing in the planter bed that you're responsible for watering. And the planter bed gets a little longer. And so you've got to run back and forth up and down your planter beds with your watering can, making sure everything's getting the right amount of water and all this kind of stuff. So you have to be careful what you say yes to. But are you a writer, are you sitting at Starbucks? Invariably, I will sit next to people on airplanes and they'll ask me, what do you do and all this kind of stuff. And I'm at the point now, because if what's your name? And then if they haven't read you, then it's a million questions. I just tell people I sell funerary supplies. I sell cremation urns.
Yeah, and no one asks you one more question.
No, I tell them I'm a bowling pin distributor, and that one shuts things down pretty quick too. So kind of
yeah, no. If you really want to be doing it, you'd be doing it, right? That's with kind of anything. So that's great advice. Writers write. So then after all of this, actually, you know what? Tell us, how did you get your first book published? Did you submit a finished manuscript and just pitch to agents? How did that all come together?
All right. So I'm going to take you back to the dewy slopes of history, back to my honeymoon. So I told my wife, so we did a 3-month trip around the world. So I had been a travel journalist and I was really keen on doing one of these things where you can, you pay X amount of dollars and you can hit X amount of stops as long as you keep going in one direction around the world. Kind of a cool thing. And I said to my wife, we don't have kids. We're never going to get this chance again. Let's do it. Let's do it now for our honeymoon. And we did. So it was in Italy where she asked me the question, I believe it was in Italy, where she asked me the question, what would you regret in your deathbed never having done? So anyway, tell her, I want to be an author. Okay. 2 hours protected time, no phone, no fax, no emails, just make it happen. When we get home, cool. So for my show, Traveling Light, I had I had gone to Lucerne, Switzerland, and there is a beautiful monument that's carved into a rock face in Lucerne. Mark Twain called it the most moving piece of rock in the world. It is a dying lion with a spear broken off in its side, and it was carved to commemorate the 700 plus Swiss Guard that died defending King Louis and Marie Antoinette in the initial throes of the French Revolution. And I said, boy, I like the sound of that. The Lion of Lucerne. I like the alliteration. The Lions of Lucerne would be a great title for a book if I ever write one. And that's, again, back when I was in TV, before I admitted my deepest, darkest secret to my wife. So I'd had a title for a book, and I said, gosh, I don't know how I would involve Lucerne or Switzerland in a book, but boy, I like this title. If I ever write one, that's going to be my title. So we're traveling. It's fall in Europe, and we go to Munich for Oktoberfest. The beer, they warn you, it really is stronger than American beers. And I woke up the next morning with an Oktoberfest-sized hangover, and we were on our way to catch a train to go to Amsterdam. And at the time, the people that do the Rail Passes, Rail Europe Group, was one of my sponsors for my public television travel series, and they had given us rail passes and as many overnight train compartments as we wanted, which is a great way to save money. And we were young newlyweds, 3 months on the road's a long time. So it was a great thing to do. The Munich to Amsterdam leg of the Honeymoon was the only overnight train compartment I could not get a private compartment. We were going to have to share with other passengers. And I was really bummed out, and I was trying to change it. In every city we went to that had a train station, my wife was getting fed up, and she eventually fired me as the travel agent for our honeymoon because I was wasting so much time on this last leg, Munich to Amsterdam. My wife just said, listen, you always tell your friends everything happens for a reason, all works out for the best. And they said, well, that's what I tell them when they won't take my advice and they keep moaning about their problems. It's kind of a way to shut down the conversation. And my wife said, nope, listen, whatever happens on that overnight, Munich to Amsterdam, we're just going to roll with it. Okay, let's go see some museums. Let's have some fun. Stop worrying about this overnight. So we get to the train in Munich. I've got my Oktoberfest-sized hangover. I'm dreading who's going to be in this compartment, because I have been on trains in Europe with the, gypsies starting a hobo fire, like at a coffee can inside the overnight compartment, a couple attempted muggings. I mean, really bad stuff. And I was like, this is going to suck. Got in there, and it was a lovely brother and sister from Atlanta, Georgia. And they could not have been nicer people. They recognized me immediately because they were big fans of my TV show. And they were just super. And the sister, Cindy Jackson, and I spent almost all night talking about our shared love of books. She recommended some authors for me and all this kind of stuff. And we had to get a little bit of sleep before we got into Amsterdam. And Cindy asked me, she said, are you going to go back and do some more TV when you get home from your honeymoon? And I figured, now that I had committed to my wife and told my wife that I was going to write a book, the more people I told this was my next project, I was going to write a book, the more real it would become and the more committed to it I would be. So I told Cindy, when I get back, I'm going to write a book, blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay, cool. Next morning, train pulls into Amsterdam. And as we go, we're standing on the platform together. As we go to exchange business cards, Cindy hands me hers, and she's a sales rep for Simon & Schuster. And she says, if you write that book, I want to read it. And if I can help you at Simon & Schuster, I want to do that. So that was awesome. And then one other thing happened that morning, which was it was pouring down rain. We couldn't get a cab. We had to drag our bags to the hotel. We get to this little hotel in Amsterdam, and the room's not ready yet. So this will be fun for your listeners, because I've got a bit of a fuck you Chicago in me too, which is the manager's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And, there's a little cafe around the corner, and go in, get a sandwich. And by the time you come baback, the room will be ready. Well, being the cynical Chicago guy that I am, I figure his brother-in-law owns the cafe, and the rooms are never ready on time. He ends up sending people down to the cafe to spend a little bit of money, and then they come back. Well, fact was, the manager was so sweet, and they wanted to put flowers and chocolate in the room because they knew it was a honeymoon thing. But we go into the cafe, and my wife pulls out a paperback from her bag. She's always got a book on her. And I'm looking for something to read, and it's funny. I'm kind of reflecting, wow, I decided I've committed to writing a book. I've met a sales rep from Simon & Schuster. I got a title and I just need an idea for a book. And so I'm looking around for something to read while we wait for the food. And I find an English language newspaper. And I pick it up and I'm flipping through it and I find this really, really tiny little story about a Swiss intelligence officer who's embezzled all this money from the Swiss government and is training his own shadow militia high in the Alps with high-tech weapons from his own private arsenal. And I said, that's it. Those guys are the Lions of Lucerne. That's going to be my story. Bill Clinton had been out to Park City, Utah, where we live, twice to ski for Chelsea's birthday. And I'm like, that's it. The Lions of Lucerne are going to hit Park City. They're going to kidnap the president. That's my story. So all that stuff came together basically during my honeymoon.
That is so amazing. And again, now you're really locked into that phrase because it's so true for you in your life. And I love that too, because there's been times where like I couldn't get on a freeway and I tried the next exit. But then when I get on, I realize, ooh, I just missed an accident.
Yes.
Right. So now when something doesn't go my way, I'm like, hey, thank you, because this is going to be good. There's going to be a prize here, or there's a reason. I love that story. It's so inspiring. And I'm so, wow, what an amazing honeymoon, boy. You really, on a million levels, I'm sure, but how wonderful. And then you rolled into becoming a #1 New York Times bestselling author. And I think I counted correctly. Are you at 22 books now?
I'm writing my 22nd. Yes.
Okay. Right. Amazing. So you created this now famous character, Scott Harvath. And when you created him and you were working on that first book, did you know that would be a series, or were you getting into the first one and realized, ooh, I'm going to keep going with this guy?
It's a great question, Elle. I never intended to write a franchise, a series character. I always loved the Michael Crichton books. And I thought, oh, this is awesome, because with each book I write, I can create a new character, new protagonist with a different background, different set of circumstances, different set of obstacles he has to overcome, blah, 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 blah. And after the first book, I had gone to New York to see my editor and to talk about the next book. And she said, so it's going to be a Scott Harvath book, right? And I'm like, no, I'm not writing that guy again. And she's like, wait a second, come on. All of the readers that we sent this to loved it. You need to continue this. And I said, why? And she asked me, she said, how many authors have you read where you've picked up the latest book and maybe the book takes place someplace in the world that you're not exactly thrilled about, but you want to read the book because the author's bringing back a character you love and you want to go on an adventure with that character again? I'm like, oh my God, it happens all the time. And she's like, see, that's exactly what will happen here. Our advanced readers love this character and you've got to bring this character back. And so it was that conversation with my editor that changed my mind. Had she not said that, I don't know that I ever would have written another book with that protagonist.
That's amazing. Whether it's Scott, that character, or others you've created, have there been any qualities or characteristics of some of your characters that you admired but lacked in yourself, but then ultimately attained? I guess I'm saying, like, was Scott Harvath your life coach in any way? Have you had characters that were your mentor?
Yeah, I tell people that Scott Harvath is my alter ego, much in the same way that I'm sure James Bond was for Ian Fleming and Jack Ryan was for Tom Clancy. I joke, Harvath gets to do the things my wife won't let me do. And if my wife is ever in earshot, when I make that joke, she always reminds me, when you asked if I was cool with you going to Afghanistan, I said yes. And it's true. She did say yes. She said, my job is not to stand in the way of things that you want to do. So yeah, there's a lot of, Harvath is kind of an interesting stew pot of pieces of my, who I am, my sense of humor. But Harvath's also kind of this amalgamation of men and women that I know who are working in either the intelligence community, special operations, so on and so forth. So he's really a patchwork of different things. And, having done 20 books with Harvath as the protagonist, and I did a standalone about an all-female Delta Force team, I always tell people that my books are like the James Bond movies, that you can read the books in order if you want to. But, if the new Bond movie is out, you don't need to have seen any of the prior Bond films to go and enjoy the latest one. That's one of the big challenges with writing a franchise character is you want to make sure that if somebody walks into their local bookstore and book 11 is there, but 1 through 10 aren't, that people can confidently pick up book 11, buy it, and enjoy it. That's one thing. The other thing that's a challenge as an author is, for what I'm doing, I'm of the mindset that you don't want James Bond to be that much different at the end of the movie than he was at the beginning, or Indiana Jones. There are certain characteristics of these heroes that you like. So the challenge for me is not necessarily to develop Harvath's character and have him be different at the end of the book from where he started, but how do I reveal more of him? Because that's just as satisfying for readers to learn more about the character. So I don't have to change him. Took me a little bit to realize the best way to do that. And then, of course, how do you bring new readers? If somebody, we're using that book 11 as an example, how do you bring a brand new reader up to speed on who Harvath is without boring all of the readers who have been there for books 1 through 10? So there are some things that are challenges in the creative process, particularly with writing a franchise character.
When you are writing, do you prefer to sort of hole up and just focus for an extended period of time and immerse yourself in it? Or are you still, maybe in the beginning you were, but are you still sort of like write a couple hours a day type of strategy? Like, what's your favorite environment? I personally love to immerse myself fully, and I'd rather take, a couple of weeks and just really get into it. Because for me, that deep dive focus sort of brings out the best. And that's whether it's writing a sitcom or a book or whatever, but I kind of like sleeping, eating, and breathing it. And I feel that it allows even more ideas to rush in than I might not have gotten if I just did the hour a day. So what about you? What's your best environment?
Yeah, I have to be focused there, because if you are tuning your brain to that task, it's going to open pathways and things are going to bubble up that you weren't thinking about. If you are not, in my opinion, in my process, if you are not completely focused on it, you're not going to get the most out of it. And so I disappear and shut everything down. I'll stop responding to emails and all that kind of stuff. And I've just told my friends, and they're merciless. I still get the Thursday texts like, "Hey, we're going for lunch. Come on." And I'm like, "Fuck you, not coming." And they're like, "Oh, Thor, And I said, "Listen, guys, if you were a lawyer, I do a book a year. That's my contract with Simon & Schuster. I said, if you were an attorney and you were trying one case a year, how prepared would you be for that case?" And I said, so I'm writing a new book, and one of the, I love hitting number one, and that has a lot of, to get number one with the book, there's a lot of stuff that's outside your control, right? So you don't know if you're competing. Like a couple summers ago, I got number 2 because James Patterson and former President Clinton had a book together, and it was the first week out. So our numbers against that just was beyond my control, that we were up against, I think it was like the first time a U.S. president, at least in my memory, had done fiction with a big popular fiction author. So, but the thing that I love most, Elle, is where critics say, "My God, I can't believe it. Thor gets better with each book." And that's part of the Midwesterner in me. The way my parents raised us is that you show up every day at work as if it's your first day on the job, and you work as hard as you can to guarantee that it won't be your last day on the job. So I never rest on my laurels. I don't take the readers for granted. The readers are my employers. I don't work for Simon & Schuster. I work for the book buyers. Those are the people who I want to be happy. And when they go on Goodreads or Amazon and they leave those 5 stars, that's my annual performance review. So I feel it incumbent upon myself to give them the absolute best I'm capable of, because they can go out and make, you spend $30 on a hardcover, you can go out and make that money back. But the one thing you cannot make back is the time that you entrusted me with. That time that you're giving to me, time's a finite resource. And so that's time you could have spent with your kids, on a different hobby you like, with your significant other. So I really feel it's important, and I'm constantly tinkering and trying to get better with my storytelling. I spend a lot of time between books reading books on the craft of writing, because I really do believe that as an artist, I can get better if I look at what other artists have found works for them. That's why conversations like this I love doing this stuff because you've got little hacks or you've got certain things you do in your process that maybe could benefit me and vice versa.
Yeah, I want to get into some of these little sort of, I guess I could call them maybe amateur moves or mistakes that newbie people, including you, and you've been doing this a lot longer, or me when I started. So I want to talk to you about the importance of creating high stakes. So you have the ultimate high stakes in writing these sort of spy, political, military type thrillers. But even in every sitcom, the first page, the first few minutes, there's a problem, right? There's always a high stakes situation. I mean, I guess some of the, like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Now, granted, those are real high stakes sitcoms, but they, of course, the high stakes are different because it has a different flavor because comedy ensues. But in your book, same thing. First few pages, trouble. And then, another problem. Then, layers of high stakes within the high stakes. I mean, that is a challenge. Your books are loaded with them and they have to be. So I find that beginning writers, they miss some of these elements. And one of them is high stakes. Can you talk about that? And maybe some mistakes you might have made in the beginning or that you noticed in yourself when you first started writing?
Yeah. So I don't know that I made any mistakes. I do know that my style has changed from book 1 to now I'm writing book 22. I used to have many more kind of storylines going at once. And I'm in the entertainment business. Number one, that first and foremost, my job is to entertain you. So I've got short, crisp, cinematic chapters. I don't want to give you, it's funny because there's nothing on the cutting room floor when I'm done, when I'm editing. There is no fat. It is so lean, what I'm writing, that there's not a lot to pull out. And in fact, the only thing that gets pulled out of one of my books is if I've repeated something that I said earlier. There's a point I wanted to make and I didn't realize that I said it. And my wife says, no, this was 4 chapters ago. You should take this out. So the mistakes stuff, high stakes are really, really important. So you have to ask yourself, what's the book about? I'm actually going through that right now with book 22. Is I know the part of the world I want to set it in. I know who the bad guys are. And I know where the good guys are vulnerable. But it's 3 areas that they're vulnerable. And so I've been sitting in my office. I mean, you and I are recording this, it's middle of the week, and I've been pulling my hair out trying to figure out what one thing is the most significant for the good guys to lose. And then why does my guy get called in? Why does Scott Harvath get called up? I mean, Scott Harvath is, in case of emergency, break glass. This is a last ditch. You do not send him in when the diplomats can figure things out, or a SEAL team or Delta Force can handle the rescue or whatever. This is a last resort. So that's really challenging for me. I call what I do faction, where you don't know where the facts end and the fiction begins. Because I like to take real world things. I want my books to be evergreen. You can go back and read Lions of Lucerne and it still reads like it could happen tomorrow. And that's a book that I did 2 decades ago. So the big challenge is those high stakes, and it doesn't stop, Elle. I have to continually with each book say, okay, what is going to keep people on the edge of their seats? Because I'm supposed to give you a white knuckle thrill ride. So high stakes, high stakes can be anything potentially, but your reader has to be able to look at it and say, all right, what are the good guys, the people who I identify with in this story, in this screenplay, what do they stand to lose? And how you want to make that connection. You want the reader or the viewer to acutely feel dread that this could go over the edge, and they're not gonna come out successful on the other side. So high stakes also ties in with your consumer, whether it's somebody watching TV or reading a book, with them identifying with not only the stakes, but the people who stand to lose the most in there. I don't know if that answers your question. It's really tough. I don't have a good answer for how to identify high stakes. It has to resonate with me. And then also I want to do something that somebody hasn't done before, right? So like there's a nuclear bomb that's planted in Times Square. It's been done 1,000 times. I have to come at it from a different angle.
Your books are, I love them. They're amazing. But one of the things that's so interesting about your books, and I'm sure you've heard this from people before, I can't be the only one to express this, but at least for me, what they do is they end up taking you down this like rabbit hole journey of learning new things. Like I'm online looking up the locations, going, where's that? Like and looking into certain things, like you said, some of it's faction, but some of it are real places, real people. And so I love that. And in Black Ice, for example, man, I had to put it down several times to go like, where's this place in Norway? What's going on here? So I love that it inspires that. In a way, you're sparking curiosity, and whether it's a location in the world or particular political or military subject. And I think that's such an extra added benefit. I mean, honestly, with all the stuff I do within the health arena, it's great for the brain. It's not just a fun ride. I mean, have people expressed that to you? Because I feel like I've learned so much from just reading your books about the world.
Well, first of all, thank you. That is high praise indeed. I love hearing from people. Brad, I read your books with my laptop open because I think, no, this can't be true. Or what? Wait, is that bar really there that's built that way at the back end of that hotel? Seriously, I could go see that in real life. So that stuff is fun. Like I said, my number one job is to entertain you. That's great. But if you walk away from one of my thrillers a little bit smarter, whether it's about how CIA works or a certain geopolitical issue that's really critical, particularly to the West, that kind of stuff is fun. So with Near Dark with Black Ice, I was really interested. I buy a lot of pitchers of beer and a lot of steak dinners for friends in DC and other places that are working in the government or the military, or the intelligence community. And I ask two questions. This gets back to the high stakes a little bit as well. I ask two questions. Number one, what keeps you up at night? And number two, what do you think we are not hearing enough about? What is the media not focused on that they should be? What should my neighbors and I be talking about at the kids' soccer game? What's a big thing that nobody's looking at that you think is pretty serious? And so this idea of what was going on up in the Arctic came up multiple times with some very, very high-powered people in Washington. And I said, wow, this is fascinating that China's trying to squeeze in there, even though they have no right to anything in the Arctic and all the games they're playing and how they're trying to enlist the help of the Russians. I said, this is just too cool to not set a spy thriller against. So that stuff is fun for me. In fact, I've had a couple of people joke with Black Ice that I ought to be on the payroll of the Norwegian Tourism Board because everybody wants to go to Norway now after reading that book.
Absolutely. And on that same note, you have learned and talked with so many fascinating people and had, been privy to information that we're not, right? You're out there doing political research, military research. Many years ago, I was fascinated by discussions. A couple of Navy SEALs in the entertainment industry who do consultant on films and TV wanted to write their own script. And so they came to me and wanted a treatment pilot, et cetera. And I remember as I was writing and I called one of them and I was like, hey, if you're in the middle of a crowded city and there's a 4-story apartment building and you need to extract someone from the top floor, like, how do you do that? Right. And as they explained it, so fascinating, really interesting. I'm sure you have a laundry list, of course, of these kind of fascinating things. But is there anything that sort of pops to mind that sort of blew you away or that was really intriguing to you of all of the Navy SEALs and intelligence people you've spoken to over the years that you've learned?
Oh, you know what? It's tough. There's been so much stuff. One of the funniest things that's happened, and it's happened more than once, because I'll share my manuscript with people that are my resources that help with some of the detailed stuff. And more than once I've had it happen where they say, well, we told you point A and we told you point C. B's got to come out of the book. And I'll be like, well, you didn't tell me B. I made B up. Like we said, B's got to come out of the book. And I take it out. I take it out. I actually had one source once tell me, okay, you need to change this. And I'm like, okay. And he had me change it like 12 times. He's like, not good enough. Change it more, change it more, change it more. And finally, after 12 times, I said, how is it now? And he goes, well, at this point, anybody who sees it, it's not going to be able to be traced back to me. So I'm okay with it. So it's funny. Anything, I've been at this for over 20 years. So you learn about tactics and methods. I'll tell you one of the funniest things, one of the most interesting things I learned was in Afghanistan, obviously people like cash anywhere, right? So you give people money and you can get things done. The thing that I did not know that they were doing is because of the culture over there where these guys are, 6, 7 wives and they're taking younger wives and all this kind of stuff, was that a big thing, in addition to cash, that could be used for bribes or to endear yourself to people, to tribal leaders and stuff like that, was Viagra. So it was amazing how much you could get done with the little blue pill in Afghanistan. Wow. And these guys had like Pez dispensers. They were handing them out to these warlords and these chieftains and all that kind of stuff. These guys always wanted the little blue pill.
Wow. Unexpected answer. Yeah, I really wasn't expecting that. That is really interesting. So to switch here on a personal note, if you're willing to share, we've lived some years, but we're still young. But I want to know about your own personal development as a human being over the years as you've matured. And let me give you an example. You might have had this one too, because we both have that like no shit, just tell it like it is Chicago thing. But I've recognized, and I often am still navigating the fact that, I always say I'm just a downtown Chi-Town straight up communicator, right? But I have also realized that over time, not everybody communicates like this, right? And furthermore, some people find that that type of communication can be a little harsh or brusque, or they might even attach negativity to it, even though there is none, right? And so over the years, I've had to like catch myself, and whether it's emails or conversations, preface it if I know I'm not speaking with one of those like-minded, direct communicators like us. And so I might have to sprinkle an email with pleasantries or something like that. So I would prefer to start off every email with like, yo, and just jump right into the matter at hand. And so that's one of the many things I know I've had to adjust about myself. What about you? What are some things that stand out in your life as a personality trait or a way of being that you've had to mitigate, work on, or adjust?
I don't know. I think probably the biggest thing is being comfortable with saying no. That's just so many people have been so good to me. I'm always trying to help folks, but there's times where it doesn't work, and I can't help, and I'm not doing you a favor if I'm jerking you around and not giving you the straight up no. And I mean, that's something I think was probably the most valuable thing to be able to develop, was that ability. But I agree with you on the Chicago stuff. I mean, I'm in the communications business, so I have to be a good communicator, and that takes effort. So particularly when it comes to email, because so much can be misunderstood, misconstrued. You can't, there's no tone, there's no sarcasm font. So you do have to be careful. So saying no is one big thing, and not being afraid to hold people accountable. You're only as successful as the people you put in your lifeboat with you, the people you put on the team. So you want to put the best people possible on your team, and then you need to stand back and let them do what they do best. You can't micromanage people. I'm a perfectionist. So that's something that my team is used to. I've got a great quote from Vince Lombardi, the legendary football coach, that says, attaining perfection is impossible. But if we chase perfection, we can reach excellence. So, mistakes bother me. Mistakes bother me when I see ad copy or things like that where it's just wrong. I just think, and I don't want it to be that, that I am the age that I am, but it pisses me off when I get stuff that's got mistakes. And I make that known because I get the feeling that people are just forwarding stuff as soon as they get it. They're not taking a breath, reading whatever it is before they send it to me, because I tell people by the time you get it to me, it should be the absolute best you're capable of. One of my favorite stories is about Henry Kissinger, and an aide put a report on his desk and he stuck a Post-it note on it and sent it back and said, "You can do better than this." And the aide stayed up and added a couple more footnotes and a little more information, another tab to the report, and delivered it back to Dr. Kissinger, who did the same thing. Another Post-it note, "You can do better than this." And it went back and forth like 3 or 4 times. And finally, the aide walked in with the report and handed it to Dr. Kissinger and said, "Dr. Kissinger, this is the absolute best I am capable of." And Henry Kissinger said, "Well, in that case, I'll read it now." which is kind of funny.
That.
So yeah, as a perfectionist, I understand we're not always going to be perfect. There's going to be mistakes, but sloppiness, laziness bothers me. So, figuring out where the line is and to what level, I don't want to demoralize the people I work with, but I also want people to know, I don't care how many other authors you work with. And if they'll take shit product from you, that's fine. I won't. Okay. So you can do that stuff with them. You can't do it with me. And I think if you don't have somebody on the team who says, okay, this is our brand, this is our product, this is what it represents, and this is the level that we're going to hold ourselves to, they're not going to do it. And again, this is the funny thing about being an author. And I say this when I'm talking with people on my team, is that I'm customer service. Nobody's going to reach out to the publisher when they've got an issue with something in the book.
Right.
I hear from them on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. And so because everybody I work with takes that relationship seriously. We understand all of us, how important the readers are. But it's in my nature with my folks. If you're going to go push a broom, you be the best damn broom pusher you can be. It's just, my dad, the Marine, and growing up in the Midwest. So, but that is probably one of the saying no, and then figuring out where the perfectionism needs to stop, where you're just imposing too much on the people on your team, where it is unfair to expect certain things. We're all going to make mistakes, all that kind of stuff. But, where do you set the example? Where do you set the bar? And then how do you deal with it when people on the team don't reach the bar? Did they not reach the bar because they didn't try hard enough, or is the bar too high? And having that sensory acuity and having your mind's like a parachute. It's got to be open to work, right? So it can't be my way or the highway. But that is kind of the burden of leadership, is being able to being able to inspire people to want to do the best they're capable of. And then when they miss the bar, how do you help them? Because I don't want to bring in a whole new team of people and train a whole new group of people. I'm not like, a rager and fire everybody and all that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, we didn't get over the bar. Why didn't we get over the bar? What can we do differently next time? And that's something that you learn, through experience.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So over the years, you've been interviewed on many political shows, and, people really want your opinion because you're deep into this stuff with your books, and it's always a fascinating interview. But you've made it crystal clear that you do not like Vladimir Putin. And I was, when I've heard you talk about him, I thought, gosh, you've talked a lot of shit about this guy over the years. Can you ever even set foot in Russia again? I mean, I feel like you'd be putting yourself into a GRU high stakes thriller. I mean, any plans to ever visit that place?
No. In fact, I have been warned by friends at the State Department, don't ever go. Don't ever go to Russia. Don't go to Kaliningrad. And it was interesting. 2 summers ago, so back in 2019, we were going to do an overnight train. We were looking at doing an overnight train out of Berlin. I think we're going to Paris. And the only train available was a Russian company. And I reached out to a colleague of mine just in the world of dealing with Russia and everything. And I said, listen, what do you think about, what do you know about this? He's like, don't do it. Spend the extra night in Berlin, take a plane, don't. And I said, why? And he said, listen, it would be nothing for the word to go out that, drugs to be planted in your room. And then, the train stops in the middle of, I don't know, France in the countryside, and the French police get on the train and there's something in your shaving kit. It's not yours, but they find it there. And now, just to embarrass you publicly and have that get into the news that you were found with, a bunch of heroin or something like, and I'm not a drug guy. So anything that they could have done like that, he said, listen, I know it sounds like something out of one of your novels, but if you're constantly putting a stick in Putin's eye, or the Chinese Communist Party, all that kind of stuff, like I'll never go to a Muslim country again, because I could be tried for blasphemy for my book, The Last Patriot, about a chapter missing from the Quran, that book that got banned in Saudi Arabia. So that's stuff you've got to think about. And it's a shame because I know a lot of Russian people and they're absolutely fantastic. I don't have a problem with Chinese people or with the Russian people. I definitely have a problem with their systems of government. But that's their problem. If the Chinese and the Russians decide that they're okay living underneath those kinds of governments, it's not my problem, it's theirs. So.
Yeah. So you are a student of history, politics, and military. You have so much knowledge in these arenas. And, again, been on a lot of political shows. I think the bummer of the past many years, maybe it's longer than that, just in general, is my shock and awe at how many people don't understand or even have a respect for, or the curiosity to learn about our Constitution, understanding how the law works, our institutions, the Supreme Court, et cetera. And maybe you and I got a more robust civics education growing up. I'm just like you, I'm so profoundly grateful for being American. And when you travel, you really, really get this. And I just think so many Americans, and yeah, we got a lot of problems, but we're spoiled. We take it for granted. What do you think can be done to engage people in younger generations or people in general? Do you think it would be a focus on civics education? I mean, I guess I'm essentially asking, like, what the fuck is happening?
I love you, Elle, and I am so glad to hear you mention that. I joke around with some of my buddies that I'm like the Cicero of our text group, of our group of dads, because I'm the one constantly preaching the need for more civic virtue. You see this right now with the vaccine stuff and, mask mandates, no mask mandates, all this kind of stuff. I mean, we live in a society that's based upon ordered liberty. Your right to swing your fist ends at the tip of my nose. We've always believe that. Listen, the biggest problem we have in the United States is that we are a soft and decadent nation. We've had it really good for a really, really long time. But make no mistake, we live in the greatest nation in the history of the world at the greatest moment in history. Good friend of mine, Jonah Goldberg, wrote a fabulous book that I blurbed called Suicide of the West. And the thing that Jonah said that we're missing the most is gratitude. We are at the top of the mountain. If we lean too far forward, too far back, too far to our left, too far to our right, we're going to fall off the top. We really don't understand how good we have it. I've got another buddy of mine, Tom Nichols, who wrote a book called The Death of Expertise. And Tom's got a new book out called Our Own Worst Enemy. And it's funny because Tom talks about growing up in Massachusetts, kind of a working class family. And he was walking in the old neighborhood with a friend of his, and they walked past a factory. And Tom's buddy said, gosh, this is what pisses me off. Yeah, I remember that factory used to be full, and it was full of, working class people going to work. And Tom's like, dude, we were throwing rocks through the windows of that abandoned factory as kids in the 70s. That memory is a false memory that you have. And Tom jokes around not jokes around, he actually laments people that bitch about how bad everything is while they're on their third vacation of the year or on the boat that they own. And so this idea that we need to have a little bit more gratitude, I think, is really important. But how do we fix things? I get asked a lot in my interviews, they say, Brad, you talk to all the spies and what keeps them up at night? What keeps you, what do you think is the biggest threat to the United States? And I tell people, I think it's Facebook in particular, because a majority of American adults get their news from Facebook. And that's terrible.
Tragedy.
Oh, it's such a tragedy because people join these Facebook pages, which are essentially tribes. We have become, we're wired to function in bands of other human beings. And so the price of admission to be on a Facebook page is to think and speak like the other people there. Because if you break with the orthodoxy on that page, you're going to be an outcast. You're no longer going to be welcome in that group. I see this with people in my own family. And the problem is that because they trust everybody in this group, they believe any information they get handed by somebody in the group is true. And that's a problem. There's a cocktail party game that I like to play, Elle. It's a question I ask when I'm with other folks. There was a great book by a sociologist from Harvard named Robert Putnam, and the book was called Bowling Alone. That if you look at an American man who likes to bowl, the chances are greater now that he's bowling by himself than in a league. And the cocktail party question I like to ask is, what do you think was the most disruptive piece of technology in the 20th century that served to isolate us the most? And so people will say, oh, the internet or television, blah, 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 blah. And Putnam says it's air conditioning. And he said that people used to sit outside pre-air conditioning and wait for a cool breeze to come. We used to have front porches we would sit on, and moms would push baby carriages up and down the street, and the neighbors would all talk to each other. And we used to be concerned, what will the neighbors think of my behavior? And now we don't even know our neighbors' names because we don't sit outside. We don't converse with the neighbors as much as we should. And so we replaced authentic human relationships with digital ones. And this is why I'm so anti-Facebook. It's also, by the way, where nations that are hostile to the US, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, they love to go after people in Facebook groups, because you believe everything you see in that group. So you are a prime target for disinformation. So as far as civics goes, I would like to see civics retaught in school.
Can we mandate that? Like what?
Yeah, I'd like to see a greater commitment to it, because we take a lot for granted, and it's fine. We have a lot of stuff that's been hard won, that's been fought for, but you do a disservice to the people who have given their lives, who've spilled blood to protect our freedoms as Americans, if you don't understand the origins of those freedoms and in the environment within which they were established. When Ben Franklin stepped out of the Constitutional Convention and a woman asked him, what system of government have you given us? And he said, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. And a republic demands certain, there are dues. It's like being part of a club. There's certain dues that are demanded of you and me as American citizens. And it's the price of freedom is eternal vigilance and not eternal take it for granted.
I love that. And, we both went to Sacred Heart schools. You went to Hardy Prep there for a while. I went to the all-girls school, Sacred Heart. And it was just a part of the curriculum that we all went to Washington, D.C. And I think that's really what started my profound respect and interest in, our country that way. And I'm really grateful for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is the reason I like to, from a historical perspective, I like to point people to the Roman Empire. Okay. You look at all of the resources, all the manpower. I mean, they had access to tools and minerals and all this kind of stuff. But look at how fast the United States exploded post 1776. Okay. And it happened not because we necessarily had a tremendous amount of technology that the Romans didn't have, but it happened because we empowered the individual. We said, we are going to set up a system of government where the individual can pursue what they feel is best for themselves and their families, and by extension, their communities. And that unleashed the creative genius of mankind like nothing else before. I talk about China in my novels, and China is so oppressive. There is no concept really of the individual in China. So what happens when you don't support and protect the individual? Well, there's no room for creativity. There's no room for innovation. So China can't get ahead in science, technology, medicines. They have to steal all of their things. And so that's why they have such a robust system of espionage, whether it's through hacking or actual physical espionage with using human beings. So it is interesting when you look across the spectrum of history to see, the United States really grew faster, better, stronger than any nation in history. Well, what did they do differently? They protected the individual. And that's something we need to always, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, we always need to keep that focus on what has made the nation as successful as it has. And it doesn't mean that, we can't, one side's got better ideas than the other. I think, we're so fractured right now. And it's one of the things that I hate the most, because there's more that unites us than divides us as a nation. And it's by working together with a shared set of beliefs and ideals that we can continue to better the country and make it a stronger, safer, freer, more prosperous nation, which really is our job, because we don't own America. This generation, you, me, we are merely stewards of the Republic, and it's incumbent upon us to give a better nation stronger, freer, more prosperous, more secure. It's incumbent upon us to give a better nation to the next generation than was given to us. And I don't think we're doing the job we should be.
Yeah. Do you have a couple more minutes for a couple more questions? And if not, okay, great. So on the lighter side of things, what's the best adaptation of a book you read that was made into a film where you felt like, oh, they nailed it?
Oh, wow. So best adaptation of a book into a film where I felt they nailed it. It's tough because that doesn't always happen. I will say this. I thought that The Bourne Identity with Matt Damon was excellent because they had to refresh it, update it. I thought it was absolutely terrific. That was an exciting movie to watch, and it had repercussions throughout Hollywood. That's really, I've been told that was a big reason they needed to reboot the Bond franchise and brought Daniel Craig in and all that kind of stuff, that they really saw the writing on the wall with Bourne and said, yeah, we need to update and elevate what we're doing. So I think The Bourne Identity, the Robert Ludlum book, I think that's a great example.
Yeah, that was great. I really thought they nailed it with Life of Pi, which I really loved that book. And I actually thought the film, they did a really good job. That was, I was not disappointed on that. What is your favorite comedy film that you could watch over and over again? Like, if it comes on TV, you stop and just like keep it on for a few minutes.
So I've got a bunch of them that I'll keep on going. Well, it's hard
rattle
to
them
find
off.
it. What's that?
Yeah, rattle them off. What's the list of them?
Blazing Saddles was hysterical. You could never make that. You could never make anything by Mel Brooks almost anymore. And it was so damn funny. So Blazing Saddles was great. History of the World, another Mel Brooks movie, was fantastic. I'm a big Caddyshack fan. I know all the lines.
I watch that every year. It's so good. I just love that.
Well, and the one thing we do religiously from Thanksgiving through New Year's Day is National Lampoon Christmas Vacation with Chevy Chase. That one is another fantastic one. The John Hughes movies were always good. Uncle Buck is so Chicago with Shanice Kobolowski, his girlfriend. That's another fantastic one. Anchorman. I'm a big Ron Burgundy.
Will Ferrell. Yeah.
Will Ferrell. Yeah. The Talladega Nights.
That's so good.
Yeah. So those are some of my faves.
One of my favorite parts in the Talladega Nights is I love it when he's already like stolen the wife and he calls him for like hot tub recommendations on how to work the hot tub, and he starts giving him recommendations like, wait, hold on a minute, man. What are we doing here?
It's so, my smoking blonde hot wife and and those kids were such punks. What'd you do today? So I threw a bunch of Grandpa Chip's war medals off the bridge.
Yeah. And back to Caddyshack for a second. Gosh, I really wish Ted Knight lived longer than he did, because that just every time I watch that film, I'm like, oh, that guy, so good, missed out on so much stuff.
He had a great sitcom that was set in San Francisco where he was a syndicated cartoonist, and I think was it Too Close for Comfort? And there was Jim J. Bullock was friends with like his daughter. Monroe was the name of the character, and he'd always draw out the name like that. No, Ted Knight was a genius, and that movie is so damn funny. That Caddyshack, I love that.
So fun. What? And look, you're a pretty alpha dude, but what is one of your favorite romance films that even gives you maybe some goosebumps or those kind of juicy feelings?
Oh, so there is, it's a Meg Ryan movie, and it's a remake of Wim Wenders' On the Wings of Desire. It's Meg Ryan, Nicolas Cage, and I'm going to blank on it, where Nicolas Cage, I think it's City of Angels, and Nicolas Cage is an angel, and he decides that he wants to forego being an angel and be human just so he could spend time with Meg Ryan. And it happens. They get together. She realizes how special he is, and she gets hit by a truck. So I just read an article that said highly intelligent people are drawn to dark humor. That wasn't dark humor, but the fact that I cracked up at the fact.
Yes, you made it so. I love dark humor.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it's, On the Wings of Desire was the original Wim Wenders movie, and then I think it's City of Angels that Andre Braugher's in it as kind of the lead angel, and then Nick Cage, and Meg Ryan is a surgeon in that movie. So yeah, that I just thought that was really, really a beautiful, beautiful, bittersweet movie.
Yeah. And, it's funny. I watch this one every once in a while that I think combines comedy and romance so well. And it actually still holds up to this day, which is Splash.
Oh, Daryl Hannah. You know what?
Tom Hanks. You went to school with Daryl Hannah, didn't you?
Daryl had already graduated by the time I got to Parker. But what was cool was that when Daryl Hannah finished Splash, they rented out a theater and invited all of us, the entire high school and our families, to come see a special screening of Splash before it was in theaters, before the theatrical release. That was really, and she talked about it and stuff like that. That was very, very cool. It's a good movie. And John Candy's in that one too.
Yeah. And Tom Hanks is just at such a high level good in that movie. It was so funny. All right. One last one. Now, I know you've interacted with so many fans in person and otherwise, and I'm sure this is hard to pick, but what's an experience or conversation with a fan that really sticks with you, moved you for whatever reason?
Boy, that's a good question. There's been lots. I'll tell you, I know someone who said, my X book of yours, this book was the last book my dad read. He had cancer and he knew he was not going to make it, and he loved your books, and that book was the last one he read before he passed away. There's that. I just heard on Facebook today, a wonderful woman this week posted a picture of me at the Costco in Chicago with her then 10-year-old son, signing a book for her. And the son ended up reading all my books, and he became a United States Marine. And so I like when, and I give the mom and the dad the credit for raising the Marine. And she said, well, I think your books, encouraged him to take up a life of service like that. So when I hear from folks who say, wow, your books were really a gateway, inspired me to learn more about either the intelligence community or law enforcement or the military, that kind of stuff is really, really nice. Those moments of, my dad and I read your books together, that kind of shared love of reading in families is something I love to hear about. But also those times where maybe the books weren't the reason somebody decides to be of service. I always say there is no American dream without those willing to fight to protect it. So I couldn't be an author without those brave men and women that are willing to go out and do some of this nation's most dangerous business. So I'm always flattered when somebody even throws a little bit of light my way and says, yeah, you really got me interested in the subject of the Marine Corps or the CIA or the FBI or the Justice Department, blah, 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 blah. That's pretty special.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody get into Brad Thor's books, but the latest one, Black Ice, is awesome. And then so it's a book a year. Can you tell us anything about what you might be doing with the next one, or what's going to happen there?
Yeah. You know what? You can send back whatever money James Patterson sent you to try to crack open the plot for next year's book. And not today, Jimmy P. Not today. No, I never, you know what it is? It's like we talked about not talking about writing, just writing. A good friend of mine, David Morrell, who wrote Rambo, he wrote a book called Lessons Learned from a Lifetime of Writing. He was a writing teacher for years, been a successful novelist. And he said, your idea for the book is what has to get you through. That passion for that idea has to get you through the actual writing of that project. And if you share it with too many people, you're giving away a little bit of fuel every time you let it out. It's like baby names.
That's a good point.
I know when we told people what we were going to name our daughter, everybody had a story. Oh, I dated somebody with that name. Boy, was she crazy. We finally stopped telling people what we were going to name our kids because we never got good stuff back. So I always keep it a secret. until kind of after the first of the year, and we announced the cover and the title of the book and a little bit of the story. So you'll have to tune back in for that.
I do that too. Actually, I've done that with both my books. And on the second one, when it came out, people were like, I didn't even know you were like working on this. And I was like, exactly.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us. I could talk to you forever. Thank you. I really appreciate your time, and anything you'd like to leave our audience with before we go.
Boy, I'll tell you, it is. This has been fun. I like to talk about the writing process and all that kind of stuff. I think we've hit the main things, but I'm going to add one more comedy movie because I realize we've been quoting from it maybe without knowing we were quoting from it this entire podcast, which is Throw Mama from the Train. And Billy Crystal was the writing instructor, the writing teacher, and his little closing line for his class always was, remember, a writer writes always. So we'll leave it there. What a great comedy movie and great advice. A writer writes always.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us, and everyone else, we'll see you next week.